Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Monday, the 5th of December. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this bright and breezy Monday morning by Joshua Barry. How are we getting on, Joshua?
Good. Well, the last two Mondays, Derek, Rangers have sacked their manager and appointed the successor. So I'm hoping this Monday is a little bit quieter, but famous last words there.
Yeah, we're just itching to get the football back. I think that's what everyone's had enough of had enough of the World Cup is heating up over there in Qatar, but we just want Rangers back in action. I think that's what we're all hoping for soon. And of course, we've got the friendly at the end of the week against Bayer Leverkusen before it all kicks off again on the 15th of December. Right, lots to talk about when it comes to the club. Before we do that, folks, just a reminder, we've got that great Christmas offer on the website just now, just £1 for 2 months worth of content. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details on that. And also the link is in the title of the video as well if you're watching us on Facebook and YouTube. Right, Joshua, some interesting snippets that came out over the weekend. Ross Wilson has been speaking where he's defended his Rangers record and addresses nonsense criticism. He insisted he's delivered on the mandate he was given by the Ibrox board. He dismissed criticism of the contract situation that Michael Beale has inherited as nonsense and claimed that Rangers are comfortable with their position when it comes to the long-term futures of a handful of influential players. He goes on to say, we are very proud of a lot of the work we have done here, and with humility, you look at some other work you have been part of and will say, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I had done that a bit better. Certainly from my perspective, I know the mandate I was given on the day I walked in the door here, and I'm absolutely sure I have delivered on my part of the mandate so far. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things I wouldn't look back on and say I could have done that bit better. I could have done that bit better. I'm certainly proud of a lot of the work, and there is still loads of work to do here, and a load of work to do in the coming windows for sure. What do you make of this? He has come in for some criticism, Joshua, Ross Wilson, from many quarters of the support. The transfers, the jury's out on some of them. The manager, of course, he appointed Giovanni van Bronckhorst. You did say a fortnight ago, we broke the news that he was relieved of his duties just over a year in the job. He is under a bit of pressure, isn't he? A bit of heat, but he's come out and defended the work he's doing.
Yeah, I don't know if you read as well there, Derek. He went on to say, speaking about the contracts, I'm just trying to find it, kind of explaining... obviously Rangers have, I think, 9 or 10 players out of contract in the summer. Yeah. And he said, maybe he did read this, but I'll go over it again because I was looking at who it was. I don't buy into that at all. He was saying there are 2 key assets here who have been talked about for a long time in Kent and Morelos. There's another group of older players who I'm sure everybody understands good contract management is to have those lads on 1-year contracts and review them year on year, and there are a couple of boys who have been injured quite a lot again, so it's sensible to keep reviewing before the end of the season as well. So I don't buy into that. So if you look at the players, I've just got them up in front of me, Derek. They're out of contract next summer. Alan McGregor, Stephen Davis, Scott Arfield, Ryan Jack, Philip Helander. I think they'd all fit into certainly Jack and Helander fit into the injured bracket. Arfield, Davis and McGregor fit into the 1-year rolling contract bracket should they've been given a contract this summer. That's, I guess, another whole other topic which we could discuss. Kent and Morelos, who everyone knows about, Sands and Tillman, Wright, and I think Devine as well. Or Devine signed a new contract. I think that's updated. He signed a new contract quite recently, didn't he? There might be 1 or 2 more, but I've not got them in front of me. So the top line figure sometimes maybe does make it look a little bit worse than it is. But also, I guess you could go back to that and say, well, was it the right decision to hand out contracts to a certain amount of players? I guess Wilson's the big criticism that's been levelled at him is that there wasn't enough rebuilding done this summer, and there was more refreshing, and the fact that Morelos and Kent haven't been moved on to this point. Yes, you can point to the Connor Goldson situation, but I think that was such a surprise because it's so rare for a player to kind of run down their contract and end up staying. Connor Goldson also maybe a slightly different part of his career because that was probably his last big contract, whereas Kent's 20. I think both Kent and Morelos are 26. So you'd still think theoretically they're in their prime, although they've played a lot of kind of football by this young age. I think the sporting director conversation, there's a lot of opinions about it because the sporting director is seen as the one who should be responsible for setting the long-term vision beyond managers. You'd have to say with Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, although for all his European exploits, ultimately I don't think his football was well suited domestically. But Wilson, I guess, will point to the sales of Bassey and Patterson, Aribo, amongst other things, and say that it has been a success. I think it depends very much. If Morelos and Kent were to walk away on frees, Derek, regardless of the impact they've had, especially Kent because of the money that's been paid for him, I think it would be hard to turn that in any way to make it out to be a success. But equally, it's interesting to hear his point of view on it, because aside from that press conference, we've not kind of heard from him in quite a while.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear some of his comments over the weekend, that's for sure. I'm certainly defending the work that he's done at Ibrox with regards to recruitment and the contract situation. Let's move on, Joshua. There's some other little tidbits I wanted to discuss. Great things on the website over the weekend. There's a piece you did on Michael Beale and how he believes his ideas can revive Rangers' attack. I thought it was interesting. Some of the takeaways from Thursday evening was talking about the attack and saying that he would play Čolak and Morelos together, I heard, and he wouldn't be opposed to that. And he was just mentioning he thinks a lot of the players aren't showing what they're really capable of at this moment in time. Are you quite excited at the piece that you did that he can revive the attack that has been a bit limp this season, to say the least?
Yeah, well, this is on the website if people want to read it. He didn't give too much away in the press conference, Beale, kind of as we discussed last week, Derek. I think he said a lot of the right things without maybe revealing too much about how he intended to change things. But he did give some rough overviews of what he hoped to do with the squad, playing closer together, playing more compact. And when he references his ideas and why he thinks the attack can play better, I think he's referencing them playing closer together and combining more in the first instance, maybe having a bit more freedom, playing closer to the goal, all the things that we kind of know about Beale's football. But hopefully, I guess another point he added is with a bit of variety to keep them unpredictable. I think it's important to say that he did speak about the players' responsibility as well quite a few times in the press conference. He referenced the fact that it had been a fantastic first few days and the atmosphere has been really good. And I think always, regardless of who the manager is probably going to be a bit of an uplift, especially when there's been a bad run of form, because just naturally, I think players as human beings will just see that as a clean break and a chance to go again. We know how popular Beale was amongst the playing group, many of whom are still there from last time round. But I think it's an interesting conversation because what Rangers haven't, they conceded, I think, sloppy goals by the end of Van Bronckhorst's reign, but it's not as if they were, Gerrard's team towards the end had defensive deficiencies. But I think the thing that ultimately was Van Bronckhorst undoing in those games against St Johnstone and St Mirren away was if you hadn't known it was Rangers in that game, and you'd just been told it was two teams in the Scottish Premiership, you wouldn't think it was a team that were supposedly chasing the title, because they weren't able to create high quality chances. I know they had a lot of injuries, but I think still, regardless of, they still had enough quality personnel to create better chances in those games. They weren't able to, and that's what Beale's, I guess, his first task is not only to make Rangers harder to beat and harder to play against, but get players like Kent back to somewhat resembling his best. And also he referenced Kemar Roofe a lot. I know we spoke about that over the weekend, but there's a piece on the website on Friday. And for me, Derek, he doesn't reference Kemar Roofe that much if he doesn't think it's realistic that he can get him back to his best. So I think he'll try and get these players playing in a similar structure as to last time he was here with Gerrard, with some subtle tweaks and differences. And that piece kind of explores what his ideas might be and how theoretically they could help get some of these players back to somewhat resembling the best.
Yeah, I like this point from Matthew Ross. He says he'd like to see the front three rotate through the game, make them more fluid. It was so rigid with Gio. I tend to agree with Matthew there. Some of the comments coming in, let's address a few of them that are coming in here. First of all, King Rec gets in touch. He says, Christmas decorations are a bit light there, Derek. Well, I've got a little Santa behind me. This, you can just see a little bit of
yeah, there we are.
Tinsel sort of stuff. But
Our
I'm in
tree's
the front room.
Our tree's going up today, Derek. Is your tree up already?
It is, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, the wife likes to get the Christmas decorations up mega early. So they were up in November time. I can't even remember what date it was, but it was November time. But he's having a go at you, Josh. He's saying Josh is clearly a bit humbug with
I'm actually not. Derek will testify, having been with me last week, how much I love Christmas. But I've been away this weekend, so tonight we're putting the tree up, and it'll be over my left or right shoulder for the morning briefing. So
fantastic.
Tomorrow.
Get in. And Brian says that you lads covering the friendly this weekend. We are, Brian. I think you'll be there for us. Joshua, am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, of course. We'll always be at the games. Just to go back to that point Matthew made about the positioning of certain players. I mean, again, I remember this time last year when Kent started playing out wide, that game away at Livingston where Rangers won 3-1, and doing something different in the short term, I think regardless of what it is, made such a big difference. Even though I think over time Van Bronckhorst football became so stale, those midfield runs, teams learned to deal with them. Initially, they weren't able to. So what Beale, I think, will hope for, as much as that he'll believe his structure and what he wants to do with these players will improve them and improve Rangers' chances regardless. I think he'll also hope that over these 4 or 5 games he's got before the Old Firm, I think it's 4, that by having that kind of early air of unpredictability, the new manager bounce, that'll benefit him. I actually think and again, this is something that a point that Beale's made, I think, quite a lot in these first few weeks, is that, or first week I should say, there was a hierarchy there, and although we know he had responsibility and perhaps more responsibility than your average first team coach when he was here under Gerrard, he still was the first team coach, and he wasn't the ultimate decision maker. And what I'm interested to see is, yes, a player like Kent had freedom, but I think at times that system became rigid, and what Gerrard didn't have enough variance to it. And if you're to get Kent back to his best, I don't think it's best to completely pin him to the touchline, but equally I don't think it's best. I think at times he can get lost in the middle and be overcrowded there. So I tend to play Kent where the space is, but I do agree with the comment that getting players in more central areas. If you look at the pass, which is in this piece, if you look at the pass network from the game at home to Hearts, you've got fullbacks and wingers that are both wide, and I think it was Lundstrom, Sands, and Tillman in the middle of the pitch. And there's again in a number of articles over the weekend, kind of a lot of the same points, breaking down why Rangers domestically they weren't able to break teams down and create a consistent high quality of chances, which means eventually those results catch up on you. So it'll be interesting to see what Beale does. Regardless, I think you'll hope that new manager bounce will carry him through with some momentum to the Old Firm on the 2nd.
Yeah, absolutely. Kryptonite says Cholak will hopefully get better service under Beale ball as well. Yeah, he has. The goals had dried up just at the end of Gio's tenure. That is something that will be interesting to see, because there has been a lot of chatter, Joshua, that it might not fit in a Michael Beale system, Antonio Cholak. But I'm not entirely sure I agree with that, to be honest.
Yeah, well, no, it's a good point, because the quality, I think he scored 11 goals from just under 7 expected goals, and there's an article on the website which kind of breaks down under the tactics section, if you want to read it, which breaks down how he scored so many goals in the initial sense and when he was on that kind of hot streak, and it was always going to dry up because he was scoring it. I think it was double the rate of his expected goals, so it'd be, if he was to keep scoring at that rate, it'd be quite a dramatic overperformance. But Beale used Lyndon Dykes at QPR, and he is, he's not a Morelos figure, I think, who I'm sure he did drop deep at points. I've not watched loads of QPR. I've watched a few games, but I don't think he was that type of player that Morelos was. Now the task is going to be different, because QPR, although I think they were quite ball dominant in the Championship, the reason that Gerrard and Beale did that with Morelos was to try and pull the centre back out. Because if you think about it, if Morelos is a central striker and you can't create space in the defence, if he comes and drops deep, either defender comes with him and you create space in the defensive line, or he comes into the midfield untracked and you've got a free passing option. And it worked well in that season. Although Morelos didn't score a lot of goals, I thought towards once he came back from injury up until that goal at Livingston, he played some really good football and that really helped the team. So I don't think it's a case that Čolak can't. And also, if you remember the Aberdeen game at home, Čolak, I think he's received about 13 or 14 average passes, which I know sounds a bit boring, but that's about 3 times less than what Morelos' average was the season before. So it kind of shows the difference of role. But if you look at that game against Aberdeen, even if you just watch the highlights from it, you'll see that Čolak drops in numerous times, quite comfortable dropping deep, lots of nice touches. So while I don't think it's his natural game, I think he's grown a lot in that role since that game against Livingston, the away game at the start of the season, Derek. And what you have a guarantee with him is that he's going to score. He's got 11 goals in just over, I think it's almost 13 full 90 minutes. It's about as good a record, I think, as you could have hoped for someone playing in what was an underperforming team for the start of their Rangers career. So I think Beale will look at that and think that's guaranteed goals. I need to use that. The interesting thing is, Derek, how if he wants to keep Morelos, it's again back to the point we're making at the start of the season. Do you play them together? Can you play them together? Because you can't get Morelos fit, I don't think, if he's not playing games, and you can't keep him at the club if he's not playing games. So it is a bit of a difficult situation, but I don't think Čolak won't play because of his style. Could be wrong on that. I think Beale will see a player who has a really good goal return and he can work with him. Just might take a bit of time to get him playing in his system.
Yeah, a comment here saying could Morelos play on the right? I think if he was playing the two of them, that is the most likely position for him, I would say, Joshua. Antonio Čolak's not going to play out there, is he? So I think he is an out-and-out centre forward, whereas Morelos can have that little bit of give and go and can play in a number of other positions in that forward line. So I think that would be most likely. He did talk about Kemar Roofe, like you say.
Yeah.
Steve M55 says, I think he likes Roofe more than either of the strikers. So until he gets his next injury, he will play. But that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, he's been plagued by these injuries, well, not only at Rangers, but throughout much of his career. So he's one for me, Joshua. If they can get a tune out of him in any way, shape or form, it's a bonus, but you just can't rely on him, unfortunately.
Yeah, then you look back at the that season, though, and I think he was a top scorer, and he was able to play a real consistent run of games. I totally agree with you, Derek. I think the conversation around Kemar Roofe, I remember a few weeks ago, we did a morning briefings and we thought, what title will we do it? And we did it, is Kemar Roofe going to XXY solve Rangers goal scoring issues? And then at the press conference an hour later, he was ruled out for 3 weeks. And that kind of summed it up. As soon as you start to get excited about a player like that, as soon as you start to think, could he be part of the helping solve the puzzle? But again, I don't think that Beale comes in and makes those points. And let's remember, by Thursday, he'd spent 3 days training with the players. I'm sure they've been brought up to speed with all the injury situations. He'll have spoken to all the players individually. I just wonder if he thinks maybe it's Roofe under a different manager. We know with all players at points, sometimes it's maybe a case of pushing through certain elements of pain. I guess when you've had lots of injuries in the past as well, sometimes niggles will happen, and it's maybe hard to always play through those. But I just don't think he'd mention him so much if he didn't think he was going to be able to play. So I guess watch this space, but it shows how he can use two forwards, I guess, in a front line. Can Morelos do that to the same degree? I don't know, but certainly I think Beale will want to get as many goal scorers in that front line as possible, and because Kent doesn't tend to score a lot of goals, he'll need someone else alongside the main striker.
Yeah. Question here from Brian. Josh, when you were at the training day, was Hadji involved?
He wasn't in the team training, though, but I know he is back on the pitch. So last time I spoke to a couple of people, sorry about that, they told me he was on track. Obviously, it's an ACL; it's not a small injury. So no. I think there's getting up to speed, and then there's almost probably learning to run again when you've been.
Yeah, I think the the original prognosis was January time, and I think that's probably most likely. But it's good to see him back on the grass. That little video he done with RTV was fantastic to see him progressing. Just going back to the Christmas decorations chatter. Robert Godfrey says, since we're talking about Crimble decks, my lovely wife is allergic, so no real tree this year. $90 saved. And Jim McKerrow says, a couple of young grandkids coming later to help us put up the tree. What could possibly go wrong? Let's get you've been framed written all over it, I think, Jim. But yeah, be careful when you're sticking the tree up there. And I wanted to talk about a few comments coming in. Of course, Borna away with Croatia, Joshua.
Yeah.
There is talk that he could play tonight against Japan. There's a report suggesting that Borna Sosa is injured. Now that leads on to another thing that Callum McKenzie points out. If Croatia progress today, is it unlikely to expect Borna back for Hibs, making Divine our only left-back option? I'm not too sure what the situation with Ridvan Yilmaz is with his injury, Joshua, but that's an interesting one. If Croatia progress today, the deeper they go into the competition, then it's going to be a race against time for Borna to come back and play against Hibs, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think when the game after that would be, because at the moment the centre-back options aren't plentiful, are they? So
no.
I guess that's something that we'll see at the Bayer Leverkusen friendly at the weekend, and then speaking to the manager kind of in the lead up to the Hibs game. But I kind of just imagine if that break hadn't come at that time for Rangers and they'd have been playing through all these games with basically absolutely no fit centre-back. So that is definitely a worry, especially given the fact that although Divine can play left-back, he's not naturally left-footed, and we know how Beale tends to like to use his full-backs to go high and wide. But it'd be interesting. I think it's 3:00 Croatia play today, so I hadn't heard that report, so it'll be interesting to see if Borna does get a game.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'd be surprised if Ridvan, or maybe he will be back, because it was his hamstring, wasn't it? So
yeah.
I guess it all very much depends on how he recovers from it. Ben Davies can also, I think, play there, but can he play wide left back? I don't know. Yeah, Connor's saying that there. I don't know. Yeah. I'd need to look at who else there is in front of me, but there's not many names that stand out off the top of your head when you think of all the defenders that are injured. And I guess that's part of the issue when you've got two injury-prone centre-backs in Suter and Helander. You leave yourself quite short.
Yeah, and Stephen says King can play left back as well. Yeah, he's quite versatile across the back, but certainly as a makeshift at the moment. You just hope that the players that you mentioned, Joshua, although I don't hold out much hope that Suter and Helander will be back anytime soon, but the likes of Goldson I think is huge, and hopefully they can get them back for the run of games coming up. Just wanted to touch on as well, the Rangers B team and the women's team had two great results at the weekend. David McCallum's side thumped Bo'ness United by 4-0, so a fantastic result for them. And the Glasgow Rangers beat the Glasgow women by 10-0 in their match over the weekend also. So well done to the girls and Malky Thompson there for that result also. Okay, folks, I think that'll do us there for now. Thanks to everyone for interacting with the show as ever. It really is much appreciated. If you've not already done so, you can see the little banner on the screen. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We surpassed 10,000 followers over the weekend, which is great to see. So thanks very much for all your support. And as you can see the little ticker below, we've got that Christmas offer on just now where you can get 2 months worth of content on the site for just £1. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details. Okay, we'll be back again tomorrow, but until then, enjoy the rest of your Monday.